Welcome to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with John and Jim from CRIS Financial. In this podcast, we help you take a well-rounded approach to retirement planning so you can retire with complete certainty. If you're looking for proven and straightforward retirement advice, ranging from how to protect your assets to how to spend with confidence, this show is for you.
Hello and welcome to Well-Rounded Retirement with Jim Donewald and John Glowacz from CRIS Financial. Jim, how are you today?
I'm good, Eric. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited about today's podcast. You're doing something a little bit different. You're kind of letting me grill you a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just trying to think of something new and different. I try to give a lot of information, try to keep people educated out there. And sometimes I just want to take a step back a little bit today, I thought. And I have clients that'll sometimes catch me and they'll say, look, I've only got like 10, 15, 20 minutes. What should I really be focusing on as far as retirement goes? What's the biggies out there?
Yep. And for those that are not working with somebody, this is even more important because either they need to be doing this, thinking about this, or talking to somebody about this, right?
Exactly. I use this as kind of like a starting point. This is the kind of parts of conversations I have every day. If these are things you're already doing, that's great. That's the idea. If you're not doing them, you should be thinking about them or maybe getting help with them. And that's really what today's about.
All right. Jim's best of the best. That's what I'm hearing from you. So where do we start?
Well, just because the topic is so fresh in everybody's mind, I always start with taxes. You've heard me on several podcasts now bring that up. But that's certainly, I think, a number one player right now in everybody's retirement. And at least you need to look at it to see if it's a problem or not. So I always start with taxes, and then I think about what can I control and what can't I control. Just as a starting point. So I look at, your IRAs, your 401ks, wherever your retirement funds, anything that's pre-taxed. Mm-hmm. And let's think about that for a minute. So, when you show people their IRAs, and by the way, that's the number one place where people have packed their money. That's where they go because we've been taught to do that, and that's good. Mm-hmm. But there's some limitations. So the first one is you realize until you're 59 and a half, you can't take money out, or if you take it out, there's a penalty. And then on the other hand, at 72, you need to start taking that out. So if you haven't taken it out, then they're going to force you to take it out. And so really we only have 12 and a half years where it's up to us how we want to handle that money, where there's no penalties, really no restrictions. So prior to that point, they don't want us to take it out. They want us to save it for our retirement. And if we take it out early, and there's a couple of exceptions to that. If we take it out early, there's a 10% penalty. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, if you say, fine, I've built it up. Hey, man, I really don't want to touch it. That's not in the cards either, because they're saying at age 72, we want to start taking that. We want to start raising some tax revenue. So that's one I always bring up. And here's why. So let's just take anybody. How old are you, Eric?
46.
You're 46. Well, for this example, you're a little bit older because
I'm 56.
Let's just say, you got a client, anybody, could be anybody. You got a client and he's got $1 million in his IRA. Let's say he's 60. I'm going to go with 60. We'll go with 60, and I want to retire at age 65. I've got $1 million in my IRA and my 401k. I'm retiring at 65. Do you know what your tax rate will be?
Oh,
do you have a guess?
No, I have no idea. Because am I single? Am I married? There's so many different factors, right?
Absolutely. And also the fact, don't we change our tax rates every year? Or do we have the ability to? They change all the time anyhow.
Yeah, true.
So if we have money in our IRA, how much is your money? How much is yours? How much can you spend? Let's say you got $1 million. Let's say you're 65 already. I got $1 million. Of that $1 million, how much is mine and how much is just a tax bill?
I'd like to say, well, I don't know. 80%'s mine, 20% to taxes.
Maybe not. Yeah. And what's going to change? One other thing is right now is, we're still projecting out too. So even when we run the numbers, it's still, a best guess. We can get people closer, at least show them the effects of a rising tax rate environment, what that will have, even if we don't have the exact numbers. But my whole point is, let's say you fall in the 30% tax bracket, If $700,000 would be yours, $300,000 is a tax bill. All of a sudden, you look at your $1 million a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And if we don't know how much we can spend or how much is really going to be ours, especially if we're trying to go 5 or 10 years out, isn't that something you'd like to know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
how are you going to plan if you don't have an idea? If you're thinking you got $1 million to spend, that's a lot different than 700,000. So what I say is, let's take a look at this. And we've mentioned several times, we've got software. I know a lot of other people that have certain software that can run some scenarios to at least give you an idea based on your income, based on the tax rates now. What does this look like? How much do we owe? Because, like I said, I don't know how you can plan with these big unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, if somebody says to me, hey, I'm not worried. I'm just going to pass this. I'm going to pass this IRA on to my kids. I don't really need the money. I'm going to take the required minimum distributions, and then they can have it. Well, nothing wrong with that. And I'm sure your kids will enjoy it. But a law was passed, the Secure Act, and now they've eliminated the stretch IRA. So for many people, they were going to leave their money to their children, and they were going to be able to use that over their lifetime. And that's since been shortened to roughly 10 years. So think about this. Hopefully you live a nice long life, but when you pass away, how old are your kids going to be? Maybe late 40s, early 50s. I don't know. It depends when you got married, when you had children.
Mm-hmm.
But might you be passing this money on to them right when they're at their peak earning years?
Yeah, that's actually a really good possibility.
So if you're leaving them these funds because you didn't want to pay taxes on them, and I understand that, but you're giving it to them, and they've got a limited time to take it at their peak earning. You remember, this money has never been taxed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, that's at least, once again, these aren't necessarily maybe problems for people, but that's certainly something you should be thinking about. So paying the taxes or on some of that money, that's as good as giving them gifts while they're alive. Just something to think about.
Mm. And you've spoken about it before, that not everybody retires, whether it's the children or the original owner of the IRA. Not everybody retires the same way. I mean, your example, you said, your client is 60 years old, or the person's 60 years old. He wants to retire at 65. Well, guess what? He retires at 65, and he has all these plans what he's going to take out of his IRA. But after a year, he's bored and he decides to do some side work, consulting, or he just decides to get a part-time job or whatever. All those little factors factor into how much they take out every year and what tax bracket it pushes them into. I mean, that's something you've told me. And each tax bracket, I don't know them all, but I know that there's different levels, and that's something to be cognizant of as well.
Well, absolutely. Once we get close to retirement, like I said, I just want to touch on the highlights today, but it's how does this affect my provisional income? How does this affect this? Everything's tied together, but you got to start somewhere. So I say, let's just start with some of the basics. Look at these, see if these are problems or not that you want to address. Mm-hmm. And like you said, or how about the opposite effect? I want to retire at 65. I get laid off. I can't find work again. Mm-hmm. Geez, I wasn't planning on touching that money. Now I've got to grab it now. Maybe I've got a severance package. Once again, what is this doing to my tax rates? There's so much involved there, but it's something we have control over and something we can plan. And that's the whole point here. Let's look at it because, it's funny. We described the IRA plans. Do you know the rules for getting out of your IRA?
No.
Well, so no idea. Yeah. Nobody does. We're all in them, and myself included. This is a great place to pack away some money, but think about this. So you've made a deal. Let's say I came to you and I had just a blank loan form. I said, okay, Eric, here's a couple $100,000. Just sign at the bottom here. And you said, well, Jim, there's no interest rate. There's no payment terms. Don't worry about it. I'll figure that out later. I mean, are you going to take that deal?
I like you, Jim, but no thank you.
I wouldn't take that deal. Well, we've all kind of signed up for that in respect. So, we don't know what the tax rates are. That's my first thing. When you retire, like I said, we were told they're going to be less. I have reason to believe now they probably will not be. Also, most people were under the assumption they would need a lot less money in retirement, and that hasn't been my experience. My experience is people want pretty close to the money they're making while they're working, most of our clients anyhow. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to want a large income, and you're not going to be in a lower income tax bracket, these things all have an effect. And this is what I'm saying. So these IRAs, one of our big things we've been preaching on all year and last year and the year before that, was, what are you doing about it? As long as you've got a plan, that's good. What's your plan? And do you have a plan? Have you even thought about it?
Yeah. And can that plan be tweaked, right? Because you may have planned something 3 years ago or thought about it, and A, life changes, right? And then B, rules change. And that's what you spoke to earlier.
Absolutely. I kind of kid about it, but every plan we put together over here at CRIS Financial has got an escape hatch, because the best plans, may not work out for various reasons, and you want to make sure that you can redirect, like you said. You want to constantly tweak this if it needs it. Hopefully you set up a nice plan, you can let that ride. But if things change dramatically that we can never see coming, and they do, then you got to be able to work with that. So, if you're of the belief that if tax rates were going to go up because of our tremendous need for cash right now with COVID and the pandemic and everything that's going on, in addition to our normal spending on, how about Medicaid for all? That's going to cost us money. So if you under the belief the tax rates are going to go up, then we believe there's an ideal place to have your money, whether it's taxable, tax deferred, and tax free. There is a equation, there is a mathematical solution for that, and that's one of the things that our recommendations are all math-based solutions. That's how we make them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what's next?
Well, what's next is here's the big thing. So if you decide that there is the tax rates will go up, there's really only two plans out there. One, your plan, and two, the government plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we kind of talked about signing the blank loan forms. That's the government plan. And if you decide not to plan, that's the plan you default to. So it's just very simple. You want to have some idea, because that's all there is. There's only those two options. There's no, hey, we're going to take care of you. Look at this at the last minute. That isn't going to happen. So I suggest you do some planning. We're a huge, proponent of Roth conversions. There's all sorts of things we can do. To me, what's better than tax-free? Of all the buckets we can talk about, that's my favorite one. I like paying once, and then, if that makes sense, and then never again. As I've mentioned numerous times, the cost of admission to that is you got to pay the taxes now. Too much money, you're making too much money, you can't contribute to a Roth, for example. Well, I hate to say this, but you're probably the kind of client that Uncle Sam's coming for first because you're a big cash earner. You might want to consider some life insurance. Properly structured, these can end up to be, I call them a super duper Roth. I mean, they can really work to your advantage to help you shelter some of those funds. We've mentioned on many of our podcasts here, and I even had David McKnight on one of them, the power of zero. If you're not looking as at a possibility for you to get in the 0% tax bracket, if you haven't looked at that, considered it, know what that consists of, why not?
Yeah.
Why isn't somebody talking? I know you heard about it. I know you were excited about it. Everybody's not going to get there, but every dollar we save from the tax man is a great thing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the next thing I want to mention too, just as as we get older, is our portfolios, the money we have in the market typically, and most of our clients are a little more aggressive than I would be. I would say, as a general rule, and I always ask clients if they're comfortable with their portfolios or their investments for the season of life they're in now. And I like to attribute this. I used to be a big water skier, water sports guy. I loved all that stuff. And when you're young and you're in your 20s, we had a stand-up jet ski, and it was the best thing ever. And I would look for the biggest waves to jump, see how much air I could get. Try not to break my ribs, and have a gas. And then you get a little bit older, and okay, now I don't want the biggest waves. Now I want the medium-sized waves. And I hate to admit it, I'm 59 now, but now I have a sit-down wave runner. And I don't want the big waves, So, I just look at that. It's, I see some of these guys coming in, and my question is, are you still jumping huge waves? Do you need to, for starters? Let's see if your portfolio can carry you the way it is. Can you reduce that risk and still get what you're looking for?
Interesting. Yeah, I like that analogy. I mean, that's something that I haven't heard before, and that absolutely, I'm of the age now that I'm about in the same boat as you are, on the same wave runner as you, telling you,
yeah, right,
hey, easy there.
I'm like, I don't care if I don't get wet now. That's right.
Yeah, I'm fishing from a boat now. Just like,
exactly. Well, it's just comfort, and like I said, we've got clients that fall all across that. I've got some older guys that are real sharp, and they like the excitement of it. If you do, that's great. But we like to find out, A, is it necessary? Do you need to be taking that kind of risk for your goals? Maybe you do. If you don't, why? Then it's your choice then. What do you want to do? Because I always think, what's this market going to do next? Let's see.
Yeah.
Right now, the stock market is in the longest bull run in history. It began March of 2009. We're almost into 2021. This beats the great equities performances in the 1990s. I mean, Eric, where do you think the market's headed?
I would love to say it's heading up. It's, everything's going great, but the reality is that what goes up usually comes down as well.
Well, and they're still saying bullish, and like I said, I've never been anti-market, but we just need to keep this in mind. And and I'm still the same guy. I know flipping a coin, whether it's heads or tails, is a 50-50 shot individually. But if I get 12 heads in a row, I'm betting on tails. So I'm just wondering, once again, just be prepared for that. Have that part of your plan. And the other thing I see with these portfolios is everyone says, well, what's the average return? How is this thing performing? To me, you got to be real careful with that. Somebody described it to me like this. I thought this was great. So if I've got 1 foot in boiling water and another my other foot is on a piece of dry ice, and you ask me how my feet feel, well, I can say on average they feel okay. But the bottom line is that's not what we want, and that's kind of how averages work. And the first 10 years of retirement are the most critical. So anybody that's near, retirement or just starting to start, this is the time for the maximum protection. In my opinion, after the first 10 years, we can absorb a lot more of these market ebbs and flows, and that's fine. But that's the thing that we really want to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and that's the time that you're just getting used to retirement, right? I mean, that's the adjustment period for you, both mentally and physically, and then financially.
Yeah, I work with a lot of engineers. They have their spreadsheets, their budgets. That's great. The reality is most people don't. Even if they have a budget, they haven't really lived it. And so until the paychecks stop coming in, sometimes it takes a year or two to kind of squeak into that and go, okay, we're really spending this a month, or, whatever my needs are, or I forgot about this, or my health isn't as good as it used to be. There's a lot of things that can happen. So like you said, we want everyone to have a guideline, a plan, a roadmap, but then, you've got to be prepared. There's some things that are going to change. And so that brings me to the other thing I always talk about is we believe in a multitude of vehicles. I like diversification and different instruments, vehicles, whatever you want to call them. Some financial instruments are excellent for accumulation. Some are good for distribution, and some are good for growth. And so I like to use everything at my disposal. I don't care what it's called if it accomplishes the goals I'm looking for, because the market is full of unsystematic and systematic risk. And unsystematic risk, can be reduced with diversification. So, if you have you're in the tech sector or the housing sector, any of that, you buy multiple companies in there so that if one of these companies goes out of business or something happens, it doesn't really affect your overall portfolio, or you've at least mitigated some of that risk. But systematic risk are things like recession, war, the housing bubble we had in 2008. And you need a whole different strategy for that. You need something that will not be affected or non-correlated from those markets, so that when you're in retirement, once again, if you can tell me what's going to happen, we got a place for you at this firm. But if you can't, you need to prepare. So Eric brings me my question. Who is exceptionally adept at managing and mitigating risk?
Oh, I know the answer to this because I learned it from you. I mean, the insurance, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that they're not affected by the market, just like you were talking about.
Yeah, they've got all sorts of strategies. I mean, people forget. I mean, we insure our houses, our cars. We do all sorts of things. I look at this as some insurance on my portfolio. How about some funds that can't lose or can't go backwards on? Why would you not bring this into the picture? Annuities are one, and people, I don't want annuities, I hate them. Well, that may be. Most of the time it's because they don't properly understand them, or maybe they're not using them correctly. That's still your personal choice. That's fine. But why wouldn't you at least look at those options? Like I said, I like to look at everything that we have available. And I have found there are some insurance products that are a great bond alternative at this point. They're doing better than bonds. I mean, there's some things out there. They can help us isolate risk, as you kind of just mentioned there. There's plans out there that have indexing where we can get upside without any downside. And I don't know. To me, I think it's certainly something to look at as part of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, if you're not looking at all the tools in the toolbox, you're not going to be able to do the work that needs to be done. That's just my opinion.
Right, or if you've got a finance, an advisor, that everything's a hammer to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the solution for everything. I hate to say it, but we spend a lot of time looking at everything. We don't show our clients everything because not everything is good. But you want to know it, and for those right clients, there's certain things that you just can't beat, in my opinion. I was the other big question I ask is for people. We talked about the tax plan. If you don't come up with your own plan, what plan do you get?
The government plan.
You get the government plan, right? Which is just then don't complain. That's what it is.
That's what you chose. Yeah.
Exactly. By default, this is what you chose. So whenever I talk to clients too, it's like, if we're looking at their portfolio and they're in a maybe position that's different than they thought they were, or they're ready for a change, I always ask them, well, what if we don't address this? What happens if we don't address this? If we don't address it and it's no big deal, then maybe you don't need to address it. But if it's a problem or something you've been thinking about anyhow, it's might be the opportunity we're looking for. So I looked at it as another way. Look at it as let me ask this another way. Can you explain to me the mechanics of what would happen to your retirement plan if the market pulls back 25%?
Yeah, if you're asking me, what that means is I'm going to be buying a lot more Tums.
Well, that's most people. They think they're protected. Maybe they are, but if you can't explain it, you should at least look into it. Maybe you've got some protection in there. But that's my whole point. If you can't explain it, what happens? I know when we do our plans, at least for the portion of the plan that we implement. Thank you. Implement for our clients. We know what's going to happen under those conditions. I can tell you what's going to happen under those conditions. So those are things that you need to know. What happens if this happens in the economy or your portfolio or your health? What's going to happen, and are you prepared for that, or at least aware of it at the minimum? So, Eric, we talked the last couple of times, and I always tell them, my big ask of any of these podcast recordings is that the listener takes something away from it, whether it's one good idea or 12 good ideas, that they take something away that helps them have a better retirement. That's what we're looking for. So what I'd like after this one, my big takeaway or my big ask is, take responsibility for your retirement planning. Nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody knows or cares about you as much as you do. And the dynamics of that is, once you take responsibility for something, it really empowers you to find the solution. If you think somebody else is going to solve it for you, you don't know what to do. But once you kind of realize and accept that it's your problem, they're really not that big, and there's typically answers out there. So that's just it. I mean, the good news is there's answers for you. The bad news is you have to take responsibility and start by asking yourself some of the questions we just ran through. What is my taxes going to be? How much am I going to pay? How much is my income going to be when I retire? What do I think my income sources will be? That's a starting point. So I kind of like to wrap it up, but I heard a good thing the other day. I thought I'd repeat it. And he said, think of your retirement as a car, so to speak. And he said, all the money you have, that's your horsepower. So all the money that you've accumulated during your working years, that's your planned growth, through your returns, your savings. That's your horsepower. Taxes are the resistance, right? That's something we have to push through no matter what. We all have to push through them. It's just a matter of where they're going to be. And we like to think of it as, if you believe tax rates are in a low environment, which we do, we believe that very strongly. Why wouldn't you buy? You're buying the tax rate. Why wouldn't you buy the lowest tax rate? If I gave you a choice, do you want to pay taxes at 22% or 37%? Which option would you like?
Oh, 22. Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Exactly, and it's just the reverse of buy low, sell high. It's the same thing. If you have the option and you have the ability and it makes sense, why would you not do that now? So think of it like I say. So if you're thinking of it as a car, you've got the taxes which we have to push through. That we maybe by buying our taxes at a lower tax rate, we have less resistance. That's the idea there, and then. Remember, there's only the two plans, either yours or the government's. Okay, the gas pedal is your budget. How much money do you need to spend on a monthly basis? How much money can you spend on a monthly basis? And then the gas pedal is our budget. That's how fast we can go, how much money we need to spend or can spend. And then the last is the gas tank, and that's your burn rate, right? So that's how fast we're going to go through this gas. This is going to tell us kind of about our retirement and our, to me, it's somewhat of our enjoyment factor.
Yeah.
And this is where insurance makes some sense, in my opinion, because we can put some insurance on your portfolio and make sure your gas tank never runs out. And so to me, it's just having these components. They're all slightly different for everybody, but they're all the basic components. And I think that just helps, and it makes sense. It's what that ends up giving you is a diversified portfolio with lots of different vehicles, tied to different things that are uncorrelated. To me, that makes perfect sense. Multiple income streams of income, not tied to one source. If you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that last analogy because I think about the fact that, like my parents, there have been times when they put the cruise control on, right? It's pretty much fixed expenses going out on a monthly basis, a certain amount of income coming in on a monthly basis, and they don't really vary from that because it's just they're living life and they're bebopping along. And then something comes up, whether it's good or bad, and they need to press on the gas pedal to get around something, right? That's how I use cruise control. I usually cruise at about 4 miles an hour over the speed limit. I'll be honest. Nobody could track me on this podcast. But then if I need to pass somebody in my lane that's going a little slower, I'm going to step on the gas a little bit. So we need to maneuver through those different things that we're doing, and to have that ability and to know that you're not going to deplete your gas tank in one shot. I think this obviously is vitally important. And I think that's a great analogy that you used. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah, and I want to let you know I haven't run out of gas since I was 16. So I ran out once and learned my lesson. Hopefully everyone else is in the same boat.
Exactly. Multiple tanks of income. I mean, gas, whatever.
Well, because I'll tell you, you got to think about it. You don't run out of gas when it's 70 and sunny. You run out of gas midnight, 2 in the morning, cold and rainy. Walking with my gas tank on the side of the road or gas can, it's not the way to be.
That's right. And back in the day, we didn't have that cell phone to call somebody up and ask for help. We were walking, brother. I know that. Been there. All right. Well, Jim, fantastic content today. If people want to reach out and start this conversation and just say, hey, look, I'd like for you to look at the plan that I've got in place. I do have a plan. I don't know if it's robust enough, or I'd like a second set of eyes, or that person that says, I don't have a plan. I haven't been hiding from it necessarily, but man, I've been busy and I could really use some help kind of forming my thoughts. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can always go and schedule an appointment on our website at CRISfinancial.com. More than happy. I'm still old-fashioned. I still pick up the phone. You can still call me at 281-665-3081, and we're glad to talk to you.
Fantastic. Again, Jim, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You bet. And our last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with Jim Donewald and John Glowacz. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jim and John come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at CRIS Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of CRIS Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.